So, I mean, you're like a very international person. How do you think the American education system differs to maybe other countries?
Um, from my experience, being educated for a while in France, it was a different experience. Like school, was a bit different. Um, I could see that primarily in the ways in which we were taught history as perhaps an example. So one of the things that was really poignant to me in France was that, in first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grades, I was taught history from like around the world. It wasn't just like kind of a crash course in French history. I was taught about pharaohs in Egypt and ancient China and a whole lot of other things and history from like a very international perspective. And then when I came to the States, I was a little shocked because I think I spent like the majority of like my middle and high school experience in the States learning solely about US history. And I was just like, okay, that's great. No shade, but I originally I kind of found it weird that we weren't learning about history from like a very international perspective because that was what I was used to, is to learn about all these countries and these different places of the world and have this very sort of multifaceted view of the world. Um, so that was really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, where I think that kind of induces like this bubble around America where it's just like, oh, nothing is going on. It's just, whatever is going on in America is like the most important thing, which I think is a really toxic mindset, or not toxic, but just like not open minded to other possibilities.
I think that those ideals are are something that I see as well. Not that it isn't really valuable to learn about American history because it really was really valuable to have such an in-depth knowledge about that. Um, but I think as a middle and high schooler, I would have appreciated some different perspectives that were perhaps a bit more extensive than the 1 year I spent in world history in 10th grade.
It's actually really funny because, well, I took that class in 10th grade, and my teacher went to Bernard College, which is actually funny. Um,
That's awesome.
I don't know, it's just kind of funny. But I definitely see what you're saying with that. Well, I mean, at the same time, though, we do kind of have, I guess there's like AP European history or, uh, those different classes. But I
Hmm.
guess from your perspective, that doesn't really equate necessarily to what you've been able to experience learning from different countries, right? I guess is that kind of the direction?
Yeah, I think so. It was just, we learned so much at such a young age. I think that was also a thing, right? I don't have this experience and I don't really know firsthand, but from, my friends who have lived here for way longer than I have, right? In first, second, third, and fourth, and fifth grade, and, sixth grade, when I was learning about, um, ancient China and pharaohs in Egypt and so many other things. They were learning about American history, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. But they were pretty much exclusively learning about American history when I was learning about so many other different things. And the only time that my classmates in the American public school system, at least where I went to school, were exposed to any type of world history was in 10th grade alongside myself for that 1 year, as opposed to the, around about 5, 6 years that I learning about all these other different types of histories. So that was really surprising to me, I think. It just really surprised
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, and I think you might have mentioned it too, like the perspective in which you do learn about the other country histories also does play an impact into your interpretation and understanding of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, I'm sure that the way that American history is taught, um, I guess maybe in France, it definitely would have maybe a different perspective as to the people that are learning it here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of understanding is kind of formed from that. I don't know. It's interesting because I feel like America has a lot of different perspectives when it comes to their interpretations of other countries in comparison to themselves. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I agree with that.
Yeah.
Um, so I've heard this more than once, I think now, and just I want to hear your thoughts on this hypothesis. Someone was telling me how the our society is structured as where if racism is still prevalent and alive in our societies, that women will not have like the same rights, like they will not be viewed equally until racism isn't a thing. Do you agree with that idea?
Yeah, I definitely think I've always kind of been of the perspective that, um, if we make progress on a specific type of institutional oppression, or we eliminate some systemic barriers for a particular group of people that might be differently abled individuals, or that might be women, or that might be people of color, right? Um, uh, you know, when we do that, it's kind of like a win for all, right? The elimination of some systemic barriers inevitably will have a ripple effect and will have repercussions for um, other marginalized, populations and communities within our society. So it's definitely like everything is connected. Like there's always like an intersection of oppression, and I think the field of or the concept of intersectionality um, really kind of demonstrates that.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. I think, well, okay, so for my perspective, kind of comes from more like black rights, and I think that there also is similarities with the idea of institutional, discrimination, or
Mm-hmm.
just start. I mean, there's a lot of different steps. It's not like a quick, hit like chop off for that person, but like from this perspective, usually it starts pretty young, and it's just the constant societal pressures or stereotypes or prejudice, and over time it just develops and shapes this person, and then when they become an adult, it almost really kind of like defines them in a way, but pushes them and motivates them to maybe be not able to reach their full potential in a way. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of similarities with that.